Welcome back to the Tea and Cookies for Two series. Customers are loving this. If you're now just seeing this, maybe on YouTube or our website, welcome. We kicked this off a few months ago with our February project. This is now our 4th month, where the whole concept was to be able to do a patchwork block, a fun little touch of applique, create these self-binding tiny placemats, and be able to invite a friend over for some much needed conversation to get caught up and enjoy some cookies. We have the recipes you can download. My grandmom's sour cream sugar cookies is a favorite I make every Christmas time. I try not to make it more than that because I have no off switch. I eat those cookies till they're gone. And then Kathy's got an awesome recipe for a shortbread. And we've been encouraging people to leave their favorite recipes. If they're willing to share that with us, we'd love to give your recipe a try. So welcome back. Kits are the way to go, right? Everything you're seeing is going to be included in your kit. The only thing you'd need to add to that would be a little bit of fusible fleece. My favorite is that because it's so nice. I don't have to pin everything. It's adhered to my pieced background here, and it just makes it simpler. And the self-binding technique people are loving. You don't have to make that traditional binding, a really cool technique. But again, if you're just joining us, go back to when we first kicked this off, where we took a deep dive into how do we do that self-binding technique. So I won't be covering that today because we've covered that before. Instead, we'll be focusing on our patchwork block. I couldn't resist for Mother's Day here, a basket, usually a basket of flowers for our much appreciated and loved moms. In your kit, you'll be getting your pattern, and I want to call something new that we've included to make it even easier to find our video if you're in your sewing room and you're like, how did she do that again? This code here with your phone, we all have phones, take a picture. Bring that up on your phone and get close to that, and your phone, your camera will zero in on that code. And then it'll bring up a link. You can click on that and you'll be able to watch the video right there. So if you have any questions during the construction of your blocks, when you're putting them together for your placemats, you'll be able to follow me along. But since you're here today, we can just do this face to face with whatever you're watching today. This is a really fun one. That traditional block with the basket is just so classic. So we start off nice and easy with our two fabrics, making a half square triangle. We have our gold and our plum colored. These are some Riley Blake fabrics I fell in love with. And our first step to making half square triangles is to either draw the line corner to corner and sew on either side of that, which is what we show you in the pattern to do. Or my favorite with the seam guide, which is just even easier, is to place the Creative Grid seam guide corner to corner on the diagonals, and I draw. Why? You've heard me say it if you've watched any videos. I'm always more accurate sewing on drawn lines than trying to find my way a 1/4 inch away from a line. So we're just going to go do that. And with any straight edge, we're just cutting this apart corner to corner, and we'll press to our plum. Of course, we have 2 because we're making 2 placemats. So you only have to do that step 1 time to get 2. How nice is that? With both of those, we're going to square that up to 3 inches. I love to be able to use the functionality and performance of Creative Grid tools. So you can see there's a 45-inch line here and a 45-inch line here. There's also a 45-inch line here in the white. When I get ready to square up something and the ruler isn't the exact size of what I'm trying to square up to, which is in this case, I don't have a 3-inch ruler. They don't really make those, right? They make 3.5, but not 3. The point is, whenever you're going to square something up, you want to square on all 4 sides, not just 2. So I'm laying this nice white line right along my diagonal seam, but I can see, if I scoot that up just a touch, that I'm off the edge of the yellow, and every side is exposed just a little bit. That's exactly what I want. It gives me the chance to be able to square up on all 4 sides. Now, once I'm over on this side, we keep in mind these 2 sides are squared. Simply flip this around. There's the 45. Look at that, 3 and 3. Isn't that cool? I have my 3, my diagonal, my 3. You have 3 things telling you you're in the right spot. We'll trim and we'll trim. Anytime we get a chance to oversize a block just a little bit, even a little bit, and trim up is a great step. Obviously, you repeat the step with this one, but let's just go ahead and put that right here. This is the block we're going for. So let's just show you the target, and we're going to figure out how to get there. We already figured out this is what we're doing. Our pattern orients you this direction. They do show our handle coming up easy. I'll actually get to that part. I want to work on this part first, and then we'll talk about that other half. So here we are. We have our 2 half square triangles. Now let's look at this. We have, this was a square that all we did was cut that on the diagonal. That's all we've done. So let's follow our instructions, and we can see that our very first step is to place 1 triangle here, sew 1/4 inch, press up. That's what we have here. Over here, we'll place this right side together, sew 1/4 inch, press to the outside. So let me get that accomplished. Then we have a little bit of a trimming technique coming up that I want to go over and show you specifically how that's accomplished. All right, I'll get that sewn on. Now that I've shown you how to do that, we'll get that pressed and we'll move on. Okay, now that we have this, we will take our 4.5 inch by 8.5 inch, a wonderfully engineered tool, one of my favorite go-to rulers for so many things, right? We need these big rulers to make those cuts initially, but then right away we're subcutting. It's nice to be able to work with a ruler that gives me more space on my table, fits better in my hands, and isn't creating, it's just awkward, some of these bigger rulers, once you're starting to work with smaller pieces. So I want to call out, it'd be easier if I just show this to you. On this ruler, we have kind of this beautiful lines coming in at the 45 again, and notice they cross right there, and there's a dash line. The dash line, of course, is our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Let me show you why this was such a great tool to grab for. As I place this here, I am placing this so that that point from that yellow, where the yellow and the purple meet, and over is the part we're going to trim away. So as you get this set up to cut, once you have that perfect spot, and notice it's literally framing the yellow here, it's incredible. It's as if this tool was engineered for this, it's amazing. We will trim this. Now we're ready to accept the other half, which has this on here. So again, with that fabric, this just started off with a whole piece of fabric that we cut on the diagonal. And I should have told you from the very beginning, and I'm going to say it now, use sizing. Adding sizing to that, any kind, by the way. You don't need to spend, don't break the bank on sizing. The inexpensive can, I think there's like Niagara, Faultless, whatever that is. Spray the fabric, dry it, cut your fabrics. It just helps this bias cut be less, it gives it more stability, which you want, because this is now on a bias. Anyway, you get the idea that you'll cut this on the diagonal. If you really want to nail that exact midpoint, when you get your kit, which is going to have your laser cut handles already done for you, and of course you're going to remove your paper from that. You can also fold this to try to find that midpoint to marry all of that up, if that's important to you. And you can see that crease and that crease now sync up. We bring that over to our mat, and you could even do that on the mat so you don't have to move it. That's smarter to probably do it that way, right? Straight down. 6-7 seconds, medium heat. Hot's not going to kill this thing, right? It's just one layer. Don't worry about that. I always like to do fusible applique with a medium heat, but I'm not worried if for this one shape I happen to be on a hot. Let it cool down, repeat that for the other one. That's when we use our beautiful light lilac thread to stitch that down, or you could be using a white. That's up to you. The light purple is in the thread set. Of course, be sure to pick that up when you get your kit. Once that's stitched down, now we bring this right side together. There's bias happening here, and you're going to want to pin very well. Very well. You might even want a starter strip so that point doesn't want to dive down into your feed dogs. So you're going to pin together really, really well. So let's see how we did. Notice I was sewing slower, for sure. Really wanting to be intentional. I'm not yanking on that fabric. Bias gets my attention every time. Slow down. Be more intentional. Don't do any swishing with the ironing. And we press to the outside. Beautiful. Beautiful. Trim off just a little bit of the dog ear here. And let's move that out of the way. So here's where we are right now in our pattern. On the left side, we have a rectangle and a square, which we've sewn together. No big surprise, pressing toward the purple. That'll come here. And then on the bottom, there's another rectangle and another rectangle. Sewn together, pressing toward the purple here. So you can see this needs to come on first, be pressed to the outside. This will be pressed to the bottom. Once we accomplish that, then comes our outer borders. But let's go ahead and get this sewn on. Looking at this, what I sew from, I would actually sew from, now looking at this, if I sew from this side, I have to worry about that seam rolling back and that seam rolling back. If I sew from this side, I will see this seam and that one's already going down. So I'm going to go ahead and sew from that side, pin in the corners, pin in that corner, and one in the middle. One thing I have been having such success with, it's been so helpful here, is this seam guide. This right here, this helps me get lined up way back here, but this holds me true. I can't literally go past that. That's good for me because I have a bad habit of sewing more than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Bad habit. Been doing that for, well, let's just say more than 2 decades, but I'm getting a lot better about that. So press to the outside, And then the bottom portion here, same. Pin, pin, decide what side you want to sew from, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Pin there, make everything else fit. Press to the outside. Beautiful. So here's where we are in our pattern, right there in this corner. For this next step, we will take our fabric G, our square, and we're going to place that. This is a 2.5 inch square. We're going to place this in this corner. And the goal here is, in essence, that once we sew on the diagonal, when we fold that back, we should be right there. Now, we give you a technique in here where you can flip this over, so you can see that spot, right? Because right now, if I just sewed corner to corner, drew a line, which I can, here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to give you 2 options. This option I'm talking about is not in the pattern, bonus. That's why you're watching today. This is your first option. If you want to put this here and know that when you sew on that line and you flip back, that's exactly where you want that to be, hitting that point, go for it. If you're like, I don't know about that. I don't know if I feel confident sewing from here and hoping I hit that point. How do I know for sure I didn't move? If that's you and you're like, no, I'm not comfortable with that, what we've included inside the pattern is a technique so that you can keep this in sight the whole time. And let me orient the block so you can see it. This is where we are in the pattern. Before we even do this, let's just lightly pin that so nothing is moving while we flip this over and I show you this other technique. I'm just going to put 2 small little pins here, just so nothing's moving around on us. Flip it over. You're like, well, I can't see that fabric anymore. Where's this going to hit? I can see that fabric right there, and I'm just going to mark it. I can actually see it through the other, right there. I see the edge of it right there. Okay, what's that do for us? Well, this is that point where we have thread and thread. Hopefully you can see that. It's right there, right there. So between here, this, and this, we connect the dots. We just connect the dots. There, 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 and there. That's what we're trying to show you. That way, if your block is off just a little bit, this guarantees that you're going to sew to that point, no matter where that point is. Or if you're like, my block is spot on, I just want to draw the line and sew, go for it. However you want to do that, you can either move the pins to this side, which I think I'll do. I don't want them getting caught anywhere on my table. I'm just going to bring them to this side, and we're going to sew on that line. Now, before we get trim happy, have missed a miter. I've probably missed more miters than I've hit. I've learned, don't trim until you're happy with what you're seeing. So we will flip this over, press to the outside, get a good look at what we've accomplished and say, are we happy with that? Did we miss that? That looks beautiful to me. I'm going to pull this back now, use that dash line on my creative grid and trim away. And I now have my block before I've added my borders. Borders are no big surprise, right? We've been doing that every single month. We make our patchwork block, we get that prepared and ready to go. Then come our borders, right? We just put our side borders on. Let me turn it so it's the same orientation. Actually, the block does go like this inside the project, so yes, let me turn that. Side borders go on first, you can see that. Top and bottom border goes on. Not new, we've been doing that. Our background now comes into play, and again, we get to do a lot of fun with our laser cut shapes. That's why you buy these kits. Fun, easy. You're not having to trace and cut the scallops. Just like we've been doing, prepare your background, iron this down. That's where the beautiful gold comes into play in your thread set. Stitch those down. So once we sew the right half to our patchwork, now we're off to that self-binding technique. People are really loving that, being able to skip traditional binding. Get your kits though. I have to tell you that so many times I'm truly buying some of the last fabric of that production, and so many times fabric manufacturers are not reprinting. So be sure to pick up the kits, of course, that are including the pattern, all of your pre-fused laser cut applique shapes. Again, a reminder to pick up any bit of fusible fleece or batting you might need. Get your kits, your thread sets, any notions you might need, and I look forward to seeing you next month as we continue our tea and cookie series for 2.